Welcome to Chapter 12. We're going to cover the organizational reward system, how organizations decide on how and what they will reward employees with, and how they'll go about creating a system to execute those rewards over the life of the company and making sure there's consistency throughout. So let's jump right in. By the end of this chapter, you should be able to define organizational rewards, distinguish between intrinsic and extrinsic rewards, list several desirable preconditions for how to implement a pay-for-performance program, define job satisfaction and distinguish it from morale major components, define compensation, pay, incentives, and benefits, and summarize the satisfaction-performance relationship, list several pieces of government legislation that have been impactful on organizational compensation, explain the equity theory of motivation, discuss internal, external, individual, and organizational equity. Now, we're going to look at the system as a whole, and it's concerned with the selection of types of rewards that we'll use in an organization. And those result from employment with the organization, and we have both intrinsic and extrinsic. Intrinsic is always internal. It's derived from involvement in various activities or tasks that you perform. Extrinsic is controlled directly by the organization. It's distributed by the organization, and they're tangible in nature, right? So it can be money, it can be gifts. We're going to look at table 12.1 of your textbook, and you can see a diagram of the difference between the two. So intrinsic is your status, personal growth, job satisfaction, informal recognition. It's the pat on the back, it's a good job. It's the quick email that your manager sent you. It's feelings of accomplishment. You achieved something, you accomplished something, you finished something. Extrinsic rewards is your pay, a promotion, physical work environment. They can actually, put you in a corner office with a great view. It could be formal recognition. You get a certificate. It's something that's announced publicly. There's various fringe benefits, a trip, a watch, so on and so forth. So when we consider the selection of rewards, how we go about selecting a reward and who gets it, it's recognizing what employees perceive as meaningful. What is meaningful to your employees? What may be meaningful to you may not be meaningful to your employees. And so they view rewards in a larger perspective as anything that the employee themselves value. And research indicates that many good employees will quit their job because they're not being recognized enough or to their satisfaction. And so there's various variables such as your gender, age, marital status, the number of dependents that you have, years of service that you've invested within that company, influence your preference as an employee for certain types of rewards. Then there's external factors that will place limitations on how much and how often you can reward your employees. And that could be the size of your organization, the various environmental conditions, both internal and external, the stage in a product life cycle that you may be in, as well as the labor market itself, what it can bear. Relating rewards to performance is desirable because it motivates your employees to perform better. And the variables that an organization can use to reward employees and reinforce performance is usually tied to pay. And in the U.S., we have a pay-for-performance program, but implementation of this program is very, very poor. It's like embarrassingly poor. When you consider other companies or in other countries that have stronger programs that are implemented and actively used. So trust in management. If employees are skeptical of management, it's difficult to make a pay-for-performance program work. I mean, it's just basic. There has to be a sense of trust that I trust as the employee in my managers, in the management team, that they truly value me, that they appreciate me, that the work that I do is valued and appreciated, that they see me as an integral part of this organization. Absence of performance constraints. Jobs have to be, they must be structured so that an employee's performance is not hindered, is not hampered, it is not negatively impacted by factors beyond their control. Trained supervisors and managers, they have to be trained based on the setting and in measuring performance standards. So when you have people that are in supervisory and management positions just because they've been in a position for a while, or it needed to be filled, or their friends or family members or so and so, but they're not properly trained to be a supervisor or manager, it literally makes setting and measuring performance standards just an absolute disaster. And performance should be based on criteria that are job specific and focused on results to achieve, on results that have been achieved. And that's where your good measurement systems come into play. The ability to pay, right? So where's a precondition to do it? If the company is not able to pay, then you're not going to be able to have a pay for performance program. There has to be a clear distinction amongst the cost of living, right? Seniority within the organization, and merit, as well as a well-communicated total pay policy. It has to be clearly defined, well-articulated, so that everyone understands what that pay policy entails. And there should be a flexible reward schedule. It should not be rigid. It should be able to bend and move and change as needed. Now, your general attitude towards the job is your job satisfaction. How satisfied are you about the job that you have in the work that you do? Is your morale high or low? That's how well you feel about being accepted by your team members, by your manager, by senior manager, by groups of employees, and this is usually tied to common goals and your confidence in your ability to reach those goals and your desire to actually make steps towards attaining goals. Various things contribute to your satisfaction. Opportunities to use your skills and abilities in your job, how secure you feel in your job, and whether or not you feel that you are in a quick to hire, quick to fire kind of work environment, or if you feel like you could actually be secure in knowing that you could have your job for several plus years. As well as be promoted to not just be terminated from a career opportunity at your company. Job satisfaction is tied to compensation, how well we're compensated, how frequently we're how frequently we receive advancements and promotions and raises, and communication between you and senior management. How strong is that communication? How fluid is it? Is it scary or stressed out kind of communication? Is it casual? Is it way too casual and unprofessional? Or is there a healthy balance? And what's your relationship with your immediate supervisor? All of these factor into how satisfied you are with your job. So there's some controversies tied to satisfaction and performance. And being satisfied and being happy are two different things, right? You can be satisfied and content, but it does not mean that you're happy. Happy is usually a sense of elation. There's joy and, you're just excited about it. Propositions include satisfaction causes performance, and satisfaction is the effect rather than the cause of performance, right? And rewards constitute a more direct cause of satisfaction than this performance. So reward can be a cause, more of a direct cause of satisfaction than actually performing a task or job. And that rewards based on your current performance can enhance future performance. Figure 12.1 lists some of the determinants of employee satisfaction and dissatisfaction. If you look right there in the graph, you'll see that you can have job security, balance of work, quality, working conditions, perceived opportunities elsewhere, how those can tie into job satisfaction leads to your commitment to the organization, but job dissatisfaction can lead to turnover, absenteeism, tardiness, accidents, strikes, grievances, sabotage, and so forth. Now, when we look at our compensation and pay, your compensation, once again, is an extrinsic reward that you receive in exchange for doing your job. Pay are the actual dollars that you receive in exchange for the work. Because remember that compensation does not necessarily mean that it's pay. Compensation can be any kind of extrinsic reward. I can compensate you with food. I can compensate you with a watch. I can compensate you with a bicycle. I can compensate you with a computer. Pay is what I'm actually going to give you in dollars or any kind of monetary instrument that you're going to get exchanged for the work that you're performing. So when we look at the composition of your compensation, your base wage or salary is usually hourly, weekly, or monthly that you receive in pay. Incentives are any kind of rewards that we offer in addition to your pay, and that's usually directly related to performance. Benefits are any rewards that you receive as a result of your employment and position within the organization. So that could be health care, it could be dental care, it can be child care, it could be a number of different rewards. 12.3 in your textbook shows you the components of employee compensation, and I mentioned some, but let's go ahead and zoom in on some other ones where you can see under incentives, it could be bonuses, commissions, profit sharing, piece rate plans. Benefits could be paid vacation. I already mentioned the health insurance. There's life insurance. There's a retirement pension, tuition reimbursement. There can be a number of other benefits that can be offered. There are some issues with compensation policies. That the minimum and maximum levels of pay can be skewed. General relationships among the levels of pay can cause some complications. Division of the total compensation dollar can be a little sketchy. And then organizations need to determine how much money will go into pay increases for the next year. And this can be an issue because if you really aren't sure how much you have and how much you will have by year end in order to allow for a pay increase next year, you can hit a wall there. And who will recommend a pay rise? Who's going to be the one responsible for saying that so-and-so needs is eligible for deserving of a pay increase? And then another issue can be, how can pay raise be determined? How are you going to actually determine who receives a raise? It can't just be based on that you like a person or that a person did something great back in January, but are they consistently doing something great? Are they consistently outperforming? They're consistently stepping up to the plate and going above and beyond. So how do you determine how a pay raise will be determined? I know I just said determined twice. Now, pay secrecy. Justification of keeping a person's pay secret helps avoid discontent that results from employees knowing what everyone else is earning. Employees feel that their pay is no one's concern. And so with the pay secrecy, if I'm getting paid $25 an hour and you're getting paid $20 an hour to do the same job, you may be a little ticked off because you're trying to figure out how is it justified that I'm getting more. So that's the reason why you have some companies that'll say, okay, we're giving you this pay increase, do not share what you're being paid. Or when you get hired, do not share how much you're getting paid, because you may have come in getting paid $20 an hour because you had job experience elsewhere, you had degrees elsewhere, you showed potential to be able to be promoted, and someone else could come in and they're making $18 an hour, $15 an hour doing the same job, but yet they didn't have the background that you have. So this helps avoid discontent. There's some disadvantages to pay secrecy. It doesn't eliminate the pay comparisons. It doesn't. People talk. It can actually lead to feelings of dissatisfaction, because when people find out how much they're getting paid compared to someone else, it can lead to it. You then start to feel devalued, and no one's going to sit back and say, well, this is why I'm being paid more than you, because you really don't know why you're being paid more than the other person. It would require someone in management to say, this is why they're getting paid more. But this is how you could possibly and potentially reach that level or exceed that level of pay. Another disadvantage is that it perpetuates the income gap between men and women. Right? It also perpetuates the income gap between majority and minority groups, no matter which environment, company, the country that you're in. It can perpetuate that. There are some drawbacks as well. It's difficult for employees to determine whether pay is related to performance. It can cause employees to overestimate their pay of their peers and underestimate the pay of their supervisors. It can make you feel dissatisfied, and you can become suspicious. And what happens is all of that will lead to distrust in management. Distrust leads to job dissatisfaction. So, being transparent about pay. Policy is adopted by organizations to overcome those drawbacks, and to avoid total pay transparency, organizations will disclose the pay ranges for various job levels within the organization. That way you know that the job pays between $15 and $30 an hour. This will help to communicate ranges of pay for different jobs with disclosing the exact pay. Without disclosing. It should say without disclosing the exact pay. So that way you know that you fall within the range. So then at that point you can kind of guess why, in some ways, you can kind of guess why you're being paid more or less than someone else, but not necessarily. It's not always that clear. So the Davis-Bacon Act that requires that contractors and subcontractors on federal construction contracts in excess of $2,000 are paid prevailing wage rates for locality of the project. And this wage rate was determined by the Secretary of Labor. It requires that overtime of time and a half times paid for more than 40 hours per week worked. And this helps to make sure that that there are not these pay discrepancies. The Walsh-Healy Public Contracts Act requires organizations that have businesses in excess of $10,000 to the federal government to pay at least the minimum wage as determined by the Secretary of Labor. And the Defense Authorization Act of 1986 changed the requirement to overtime for hours worked over 40 in a week. FLSA is the Fair Labor Standards Act, and that's where individuals employed in interstate commerce or in organizations that produce goods for interstate commerce are to be paid a certain minimum wage and time and a half for hours worked over 40 within a week, and it places restrictions on the employment of individuals between ages 14 and 18. And that's to make sure that you don't overwork and underpay those employees. Equal Pay Act eliminates those pay differentials based solely on sex. Then that way you're not paying men more than you're paying women. It does not, however, prohibit payment of wage differentials based on seniority systems, merit systems, where you're measuring earnings by the quantity and quality of production, nor does it prohibit payment of wage differentials based on systems based on any factor other than sex. So they can turn around and create a system that deals with everything else other than sex, and it does not prohibit that wage differential. Now, there is a federal wage law that deals with garnishments, and it limits the amount of an employee's disposable earnings that can be garnished in a given week, and it protects you from discharge, being fired because of garnishment. Garnishment is any legal procedure where your employer is empowered to withhold wages, right? They take some of your money for payment of a debt to a creditor. And a lot of times this is done through either bankruptcies, but it's also done in lawsuits, and it's also done with federal and state taxes that you owe. The Lilly-Ledbetter Fair Pay Act of 2009 is a statute of limitations that are placed on pay discrimination claims, and they begin whenever a discriminatory pay decision or pay price is adopted. Whenever there's an individual that becomes subject to discriminatory decision or pay, as well as any time a paycheck or other benefit is issued. This eliminated time limitations for the filing of lawsuits against discrimination. So that way you can't take 20 years to decide that you want to now file a lawsuit because you feel you were discriminated against. Now let's look at union contracts. If your organization is unionized, the wage structure is determined through collective bargaining process. And because wages are a primary concern of unions, current union contracts are required to be considered in formulating compensation policies. There are quite a few people who are anti-union because they don't want to have the collective bargaining process. They don't want their employees to sit back and to have to enforce them as the employer to negotiate pay and to negotiate conditions and work conditions and things of that nature. And so they pushed heavily to prevent unions from being formed within their companies. And that's the reason why you're starting to see less and less unions around the country. And it's really sad because if you look at our system 20, 30, 50, 75 years, where you're seeing this unionization and this and how they protected employees, and you saw so many, you're seeing those numbers are dwindling. And the goal of many members in the political seats in our current administration are pushing heavily to find a way to totally squash unions. They are vital and valuable resources to business, to commerce, to the various industries that we work in, because they are focused on protecting the employee and making sure that that person, those people have a voice, because oftentimes you cannot stand up to the powers that be within your organization, especially when you are part of an organization that employs thousands and possibly millions of workers. So we look at comparable worth theory, and while it's true that worth of jobs to employer may be similar, some jobs are often paid a lower rate than other jobs. The drawback to that is determining and establishing the worth of the job in question. How much is it worth, and what's the value to it? And there are some comparable worth claims that are generally rejected by the U.S. courts. Some, it's amazing how they'll try to find a way to place this lower value on it, and you then compare it to other companies, and you see this huge gap in between the worth, and you're like, come on now, really, you're really just trying to justify paying at a lower rate. So there are some consequences of pay dissatisfaction. Increases the desire for more money by joining a union. That's usually one of the first things that you want to join a union, because you need to have a source, a force, an entity that can fight and speak on your behalf. Looking for another job is usually what happens. You start seeing people putting their resumes up. They should be working, but instead they're trying to get that tight and scheduling job interviews. There is also an increase in people performing better. Interesting enough. Trying to earn more money, you will also see that people will try to outperform others. They'll try to outperform themselves. They'll try to rise above the standards, hoping that there'll be a light shined on them where someone in management will say, hey, check out so-and-so. Look at the job that they're doing. Wow, we should offer them a bonus. We should offer them some kind of other incentive. We should increase their pay. We should give them a promotion. We should do, so on and so forth. Somehow we have to acknowledge them. A fourth thing is filing a grievance. That can happen where they either file a grievance to HR, the labor board, or both. And going on strike, where you just give up and say, you know what, since you don't value us, what we're going to do is we're going to remove ourselves from this environment. We're going to strike. We're not going to do our job, and we'll see how much you can produce, how well you can do when you don't have us here to do the work. Some other consequences of pay dissatisfaction is it lowers the attractiveness of the job, right? There's an increase in absenteeism where people are not coming into work, or they're leaving early, quitting the job, dissatisfaction in general and as a whole with the job will lower the attractiveness of the job. Equity theory of motivation. This is where employees have a strong need to maintain balance between what they perceive as their inputs to the job as well as what they receive from their jobs in the form of rewards. And employees who perceive inequities will take action to eliminate or reduce them. Right? So if you don't see that there is an equal in and out, input and output of the job that you're participating in, then you're going to try to find a way to either get rid of what's causing the problem or reduce them significantly. And employees who believe that they are overpaid are likely to work harder or for longer hours because they feel like they're getting over on the company. Now, there are some dimensions of equity that you have to look at, both internal and external equity. And internally, it's what the employee is being paid for doing a job compared to what other employees in the same organization are being paid, as well as externally, it's what you're being paid compared to employees in other organizations who perform similar jobs as yours. When we look at pay equity, we look at individually and organization-wise. Individually, it's going to address the reward of what your contributions are, and it's related to your pay for performance question. Organization-wide, it's going to address how profits are divided up within the organizations. The pay satisfaction model is based on the idea that employees will be satisfied with their pay when their perception of what they're being paid is acceptable and the expected pay as agreed upon. And it shows that an employee's perception of what their pay should be depends on different factors, different ways in which they are looking, different ways in which they feel they're impacted, whatever's going on in their personal life, as well as it could be variables as far as what they're seeing other people being paid. And so you have to make allowances for employees who believe they are overpaid, right? Because that can also, like I said, they'll overwork themselves. You can actually create burnout of employees who think they're overpaid. I have never thought I was overpaid, so I'm going to expand this. This is figure 12.3, the model of determinants of pay satisfaction, so you can see a visual of that. And you see where you have your skill, experience, effort, age, education, present performance, and how that factors into your perceived personal job inputs. And then you have the perceived inputs and outputs or outcomes of referent others. And then that factors into your perceived amount of pay that should be received, which then goes into either your pay satisfaction or dissatisfaction, any guilt, inequity, or discomfort that you may feel, as that's tied to your perceived amount of pay received. And so you see that you then factor everything here on the left down to level, difficulty, time span, status, security, and how these all factor in to get that outward determinant of pay satisfaction. And once again, that's figure 12.3 in your textbook. Now, the role of HR, and specifically the HR manager in this reward system, is to assist in the design and administration of the system. And that carries a great deal of responsibility of ensuring that the system is fair to all employees, not select groups or individuals. An understanding of the system is clearly communicated to all employees. So you have to take in consideration the how people learn, how they retain information. So you have to make sure that the system is basically written at and explained on at most an 8th grade comprehension and reading level. When you go too high and you're using jargon that is college level, doesn't mean that everyone can be able to make sense of it, even if they do have a college degree. So you have to make sure that system is at no greater than, is not higher than 8th grade comprehension level. Preferably, you should seek for something along the 5th grade level. So right in between there. So with that, that is our chapter 12 lecture. If you have any questions, please email me. Thank you.